In 1770, according to a story that has been repeated for over 200 years, the British Parliament passed a law declaring that any woman who used lipstick to seduce a man into marriage could have the marriage annulled and be prosecuted as a witch. Lipstick, in other words, was treated as a form of sorcery, a deceptive magic that could ensnare a man's very soul. It is a shocking story. It is also, almost certainly, not true. Historians have searched the records and found no such law. But the fact that this myth has survived and spread for centuries tells you something profound about how humanity has felt about a little stick of coloured wax. Because for most of its 5,000-year history, lipstick has been feared, banned, taxed, mocked, and treated as dangerous, seductive, even satanic. A product you can buy today for a few dollars at any corner shop was once thought powerful enough to summon the devil and topple a respectable man. That sounds insane. But the fact that queens, prostitutes, suffragettes, and soldiers all fought over this one small object tells you the truth. Lipstick was never just makeup. It never was. So how did a smear of red pigment become one of the most loaded, controversial, and powerful objects in human history? A thing that could mark you as royalty or as a criminal, as a rebel or a witch. To understand that, you have to go back 5,000 years to the world's very first cities and the very first people who decided to paint their lips. The story begins in ancient Mesopotamia, in the land we now call Iraq, home to some of humanity's earliest civilizations. There, more than 5,000 years ago, people were already colouring their lips, and archaeology has given us a remarkable glimpse of it. In the royal cemetery of the ancient city of Ur, excavators found the tomb of a Sumerian queen, known as Puabi, buried with her lip colour still stored in a little cockle shell. Her lip paint was made by grinding up red rocks and minerals, sometimes mixed with a base of white lead. And she was not alone. Archaeologists discovered that wealthy Sumerians of both sexes were buried with their lip pigments, kept in shells, ready to be worn in the afterlife. From the very beginning, lip colour was a marker of status and power, a signal that you were rich, important, and favoured by the gods, precious enough to carry with you into the next world. And from the very beginning, it carried a hidden danger, because some of those early pigments were laced with lead and other toxins. The pursuit of beautiful lips and the risk of poisoning yourself were entangled right from the start, a grim bargain that would follow lipstick across 5,000 years. Even in death, it seems, the Sumerians did not want to face eternity with a bare mouth, which tells you just how deeply cosmetics were woven into their idea of who counted as a person worth remembering. The most famous lip painter of the ancient world was, of course, Cleopatra of Egypt. She and other Egyptians, both women and men, wore bold lip colour as a symbol of wealth and sacred authority. And Cleopatra's signature red is where lipstick's slightly stomach-turning secret ingredient enters the story. Her deep crimson was made from crushed cochineal insects and ants, blended into a base of beeswax. That red dye, called carmine, extracted from the bodies of tiny crushed beetles, is not some ancient curiosity. It is still used as a colouring in lipsticks, foods, and drinks to this very day. So, the next time you see a beautifully red lip, remember there is a decent chance it owes its colour to the same crushed insects that coloured Cleopatra's mouth thousands of years ago. And to the Egyptians, this was far more than vanity. They believed their cosmetics carried real power, offering protection and even healing, and they lined their eyes and painted their lips as much for the gods and the afterlife as for the living. Lip colour was woven into religion, medicine, and magic all at once. Cleopatra herself understood something every marketer since has known, that a painted face is a kind of power, a way to command a room and project authority. She weaponized her own beauty on the world stage, and red lips were part of the armour. It is a strange kind of immortality, that a queen who ruled an empire is remembered, in part, for the exact shade of red she wore on her mouth. But even in the ancient world, lipstick was already picking up its double reputation, at once a mark of the elite and a mark of the disreputable. Nowhere was this clearer than in ancient Greece. There, respectable upper-class women were expected to be pale and natural-faced. Bold red lips were associated instead with prostitutes and courtesans. In fact, Greek sex workers were legally required to wear lip paint and specific makeup, so that they could not be mistaken for respectable ladies. A prostitute who appeared in public without her designated red lips could actually be punished for the crime of deceptively posing as something she was not. Think about how strange and revealing that is. Lipstick was not just decoration, it was a legal marker of class and profession, a way of policing exactly who a woman was allowed to be. The colour of your lips could announce your entire social standing before you said a single word. And the ingredients could be as grim as the rules. Some ancient Greek lip paints were reportedly made from unpleasant substances like red dyes mixed with sheep sweat and even crocodile droppings. That tension between lipstick as glamour and lipstick as shame, between the beautiful surface and the ugly reality underneath, would haunt it for thousands of years. It is worth pausing on that irony. A society that prized restraint and modesty in its respectable women still needed a whole class of women to wear the colour it officially despised, just so the line between the two groups stayed visible. Then came the Middle Ages in Europe, and lipstick ran headfirst into the power of the Christian Church. The Church took a dim view of cosmetics in general. To paint your face, the argument went, was to challenge and improve upon the work of God, an act of vanity and deception, and possibly of the devil. Makeup became associated with sin, with loose morals, and with witchcraft. A woman with painted red lips might be accused of trying to deceive men, or even of consorting with Satan. One medieval religious text declared that wearing lip colour was a mortal sin, a sin serious enough to damn your soul, unless you were using it to cover a genuine disfigurement. In some places, women were even expected to confess the wearing of makeup to a priest, as they would any other transgression. For long stretches of the medieval period, respectable European women largely went barefaced, and lip colour retreated to the margins of society, worn by the daring, the disreputable, and those who did not care what the priest thought, and yet it never disappeared entirely, because the desire it answered was too old and too deep. Lipstick simply went quiet, waiting, as it had before and would again, for a powerful champion to make it bold once more. Even under the watchful eye of the Church, some women still reached for a pinch of crushed berries or beet juice behind closed doors, proof that no amount of moral pressure could quite stamp the habit out. And then, in a spectacular reversal, lipstick was rescued and made gloriously fashionable by one of the most powerful women in history, Queen Elizabeth I of England. Elizabeth adored red lips. She painted her face a stark, dramatic white, using lead-based cosmetics, and against that pale mask, she wore vivid crimson lips, creating one of the most iconic looks in all of history. Her own lip colour was a custom blend of cochineal, that same insect red, mixed with egg whites, gum arabic, and fig milk. Elizabeth did not just wear lipstick, she believed in it. She was convinced red lip colour held real power, even that it could ward off evil and keep death itself at bay. There is a famous, if unproven, legend that when she died, she was wearing lip colour so thick it was said to be 1/2 inch deep on her lips, as if she were clinging to its protective magic to the very end. Under Elizabeth, red lips became the height of aristocratic fashion. But there was a catch. This was a privilege of the elite. For an ordinary woman to paint her face like the Queen was still to invite suspicion and scandal. And there was a darker catch too, one that Elizabeth herself paid for. That stark white face she wore was made from a mixture of white lead and vinegar, called Venetian ceruse, a slow poison that damaged the skin it sat on. The more it corroded her complexion, the more thickly she painted it on to hide the damage, in a vicious spiral. The Queen who made cosmetics glamorous again may well have been quietly poisoned by them, a 5,000-year-old danger playing out on the most famous face in England. Her courtiers copied the look regardless, which meant an entire generation of English aristocracy may have been slowly poisoning itself in the name of fashion, without ever fully realising it. That deep suspicion of makeup as deception never really went away, and it is the true root of that 1,770 witchcraft legend we began with. While no such law was actually passed, it grew out of a very real and widespread anxiety of the era. The fear that a woman could use paint and powder to fool a man, to appear younger, healthier, or more beautiful than she really was, and thereby trick him into marriage. Cosmetics were seen as a kind of fraud committed against men, a trap laid with powder and paint. Writers of the time fumed about the injustice of a man marrying a face that washed off in the morning, complaining that they had been sold a beauty that vanished with the first splash of water. That belief, that a woman's made-up face was a lie, was so powerful that it eventually calcified into the false memory of an actual anti-witchcraft law. The myth stuck because, on some level, people wanted to believe that lipstick really was that dangerous. It is the same instinct behind countless urban legends we still tell today. A story does not need to be true to survive. It only needs to explain a fear people already carry. The backlash reached its peak in the 19th century under another famous queen, but this time in the opposite direction. Queen Victoria, the moral centre of her age, publicly declared makeup to be impolite, vulgar, and improper, something worn only by actresses and prostitutes. Respectable Victorian women were expected to achieve a natural look, and if they used any enhancement at all, they did so in absolute secrecy, often making their own tinted salves at home, and never, ever admitting to it. To be caught wearing obvious lip colour was to announce yourself as a woman of low morals. For much of the 1800s, visible lipstick was social poison. It seemed the ancient stigma had won for good. And so the pendulum that had swung from Poiby's Shell to Elizabeth's court swung all the way back, proving that lipstick's reputation was never fixed, only ever borrowed from whoever held power at the time. But everything was about to change, and the revolution was driven by two forces: business and rebellion. The first great shift was commercial. In 1884, the French perfume house Guerlain produced what is widely considered the first commercially manufactured lipstick, a stick of coloured balm made from deer tallow, castor oil and beeswax, and wrapped in delicate silk paper. For the first time, lipstick was a proper product you could buy from a respectable shop, rather than a suspicious homemade concoction mixed in secret. Because Guerlain catered to the wealthy and fashionable, it began, slowly, to make lip colour acceptable to buy again. Around the same time, celebrated actresses like Sarah Bernhardt started wearing lip rouge openly in public, lending it a daring artistic glamour rather than pure scandal. Little by little, the stigma that had smothered lipstick for a century began, at last, to crack. What the church and the Queen had failed to stamp out through moral pressure, the marketplace quietly undid through simple convenience and desire. Then came the invention that truly made lipstick modern, and it was a triumph of engineering as much as beauty. In its early days, lipstick was still a messy business, sold in little pots or awkward paper tubes, and often applied with a brush or a fingertip. But in 1915, an American named Maurice Levy created a lipstick housed in a slim metal tube with a tiny lever on the side that could push the colour up and down. And in 1923, another inventor, James Bruce Mason Jr., patented the swivel-up tube, the twist at the bottom design we still use today. This was the breakthrough. Suddenly, lipstick was portable, sturdy, and effortless. A woman could slip it into her handbag and reapply it anywhere, anytime. That little metal tube turned lipstick from a private ritual into a public gesture, and it was about to become a weapon in one of history's great struggles, because at that very moment, women were fighting for the right to vote, and they adopted red lipstick as a symbol of their rebellion. In the early 20th century, the suffragettes seized on the bold red lip precisely because it was seen as scandalous and defiant. Wearing it in public was a way of saying, "I will not be demure, I will not hide, I refuse to be a quiet and proper lady." According to a much-loved story, when tens of thousands of women marched for the vote in New York in 1912, the cosmetics pioneer Elizabeth Arden, herself a supporter of the cause, handed out tubes of red lipstick to the marchers. The precise details of that moment are debated by historians, but the deeper truth is not. Red lipstick became a genuine emblem of female independence and political power. The very thing that had once marked women as witches or prostitutes was now a badge of liberation, worn deliberately to unsettle the men who wanted them silent. It was a brilliant piece of symbolism. For centuries, powerful men had used lipstick to define and control women, forcing it onto prostitutes, forbidding it to the respectable, mocking it as vanity. Now women picked up that very same object and turned it into a flag of their own. The colour that had been a mark of shame was reclaimed as a mark of defiance. It would not be the last time a symbol of control was flipped into a symbol of protest, but it may be one of the most literal. The same red that once got a woman punished now got her noticed marching for her rights. From there, lipstick exploded into the modern world. In the roaring 1920s, the newly liberated flappers wore dark, dramatic lips and shocked their elders by brazenly applying lipstick in public, at restaurant tables, and in the street, an act of casual defiance that would have been unthinkable a generation earlier. And a new force supercharged it all: the movies. Silent film stars wore heavy, dark lip colour so their mouths would show up on the black and white screen, and millions of women rushed to copy the looks of their favourite actresses. Hollywood makeup artists like Max Factor became famous, coining the very word makeup and inventing new products like lip gloss to make lips shine on camera. The perfect painted mouth became one of the defining images of glamour, projected 40 feet high in darkened cinemas across the world. For the first time in history, women everywhere had the same handful of dazzling faces to imitate, and nearly all of those faces wore bold, gleaming lips. Lipstick was now big business, worn by tens of millions, and by the mid-1920s, it was estimated that 50 million American women were using it. Cinema had done what no royal decree or religious sermon ever could. It made bold lips feel not just acceptable, but aspirational. Something every ordinary woman could reach for at the corner drugstore. And then came the moment lipstick went to war, and this is perhaps the most surprising chapter of all. During the Second World War, red lipstick became, astonishingly, a patriotic duty. The reason was partly propaganda. It was widely believed that Adolf Hitler personally despised red lipstick and painted women, so the Allies leaned into it, encouraging their women to wear bold red lips as a small, daily act of defiance against fascism. Wearing red became a way of thumbing your nose at the enemy. Cosmetics companies released patriotic shades with names like Victory Red and Fighting Red. Elizabeth Arden was even commissioned to create a specific shade, Montezuma Red, to match the trim of the uniforms of the United States Marine Corps Women's Reserve, so that servicewomen would look coordinated and confident. Lipstick was seen as so vital to keeping up morale, both among female workers in the factories and women at home, that when there was talk of rationing it during the war, the outcry helped keep it in production. A tube of red lipstick had become a symbol of resilience, femininity, and national spirit in humanity's darkest hour. The message pushed at women was that keeping up their appearance was itself a contribution to the war, captured in slogans like "Beauty is your duty." There is something remarkable in that. The same painted red lips that a medieval priest had called the mark of the devil, and a Victorian queen had called vulgar, were now being framed as a woman's patriotic obligation, a small, brave banner of ordinary life carried on in defiance of the bombs. Lipstick had gone, in a few short centuries, from sin to duty. When the war ended, that association between red lips and quiet strength did not fade. If anything, it hardened into the glamorous, put-together femininity that would define the following decade. After the war, the glamorous red lip reigned supreme through the 1950s, immortalized by screen icons like Marilyn Monroe, before fashion splintered into endless directions: frosted pinks, dark plums, browns, and every shade imaginable, each one signaling a different identity, subculture, and mood. A punk in black lipstick, a movie star in classic red, a teenager in the 1990s in brown, a drag performer in dazzling gloss. Each was using the same ancient tool to declare exactly who they were, or who they wanted to be. Lipstick had completed its astonishing journey from taboo to totem, and it had become a genuine mirror of the times, a tiny, wearable statement of identity. What had once been forced onto women to control them had become one of the most personal choices they could make. There is even a famous idea in economics called the lipstick index, coined by the cosmetics magnate Leonard Lauder around 2001, which observes that when the economy crashes and people cut back on big luxuries, sales of small, affordable luxuries like lipstick often go up, as people reach for a tiny, cheap boost of confidence in hard times. The theory is debated, but the instinct behind it is ancient. In bad times, a swipe of colour makes people feel powerful. In the age of social media, that same instinct has only multiplied, with a single viral shade able to sell out shelves worldwide within days, proof that the pull of a painted mouth has lost none of its power in 5,000 years. And yet, one shadow from lipstick's very beginning has never fully lifted: the question of what is actually in it. Remember The earliest lip colours were laced with toxic lead. Astonishingly, that concern is not entirely gone. In recent decades, testing by regulators and campaigners found traces of lead in a large number of lipsticks on the market, absorbed or swallowed in tiny amounts every time it is worn. The good news is that in official surveys the levels were low, and regulators judged the vast majority of products to be within safe limits, well under the thresholds of concern. But there is a poetic thread running from Queen Puabi's lead-tinged lip paint in ancient Ur straight to the modern chemistry lab. For 5,000 years, we have been putting colour on our lips, and for 5,000 years, we have been quietly checking to make sure it is not slowly poisoning us. The bargain struck in the very first cities. Beauty on the surface, a whisper of danger underneath, has never fully been broken. It has only, with each passing century, grown a little safer. Modern consumers, armed with ingredient lists and lab reports that Puabi or Elizabeth could never have dreamed of, are simply the latest generation, asking the same wary question every generation before them has asked in its own way. So the next time you see a tube of lipstick, or twist one up and glide it across your lips, that small, ordinary, everyday object, remember what it actually carries. It carries a Sumerian queen buried with her lip paint in a seashell, and Cleopatra's mouth reddened with crushed beetles. It carries Greek laws forcing prostitutes to paint their lips, and a medieval church that called it a doorway to the devil. It carries Elizabeth I's deathly white face and blood-red mouth, a witchcraft law that never actually existed, and a queen who sneered that it was vulgar. It carries a little metal tube that freed it from the pot and the brush, suffragettes who marched behind it into the fight for the vote, and soldiers' sweethearts who wore it to spite a dictator. It carries 5,000 years of women being told when they could and could not paint their lips, and then finally deciding for themselves. The little stick of coloured wax that was banned, feared and called sorcery, that queens and rebels and armies all claimed as their own, is sitting in a drawer or a handbag near you right now, small and bright and utterly ordinary, waiting to be noticed. Lipstick was never just makeup. It never was, and it never will be, no matter how small and ordinary the tube looks. 5,000 years from now, someone may well dig up a lipstick tube of our own era and wonder, just as we wondered about Puabi's shell, what kind of world could have made something so small mean so much?